We just saw those locations again for Midgley and Charles. What's your take for their campaigns tonight?
Well, Midgley kind of epitomizes the field. 6 of the 7 are outsiders. Augusta experiences as a point of pride for that field. Midgley's one of 4 who have been CEOs. He's twice run gym companies, Planet Fitness, which a lot of people in Maine know, Crunch Fitness, which is better known around the country. He calls himself a job creator, and that's sort of his central theme about how he can help boost the Maine economy, bring jobs, attract businesses, so on and so forth. And so that he epitomizes the field because a lot of the Republicans, that's their background and that's their approach.
Right, they're using that as the big calling card. As you mentioned, and as I think Sam Olson mentioned, not just Bobby Charles, but all of the Republican candidates are talking about reining in state spending, cutting the state budget, cutting taxes, and cleaning up fraud. The 4 big things that they're all talking about. It's fascinating. We'll talk about Democrats in a minute. But I was listening to some stuff, and over the course of the last few weeks with debates and all that, the difference between what all the Republican candidates are talking about, which indicates that's what their voters are concerned about, and what the Democratic candidates are all talking about, which are really totally different worlds almost. And it's going to be interesting when 2 worlds collide after the primary's over, and the realities of both those groups of voters are going to have to become the gist and the food of the campaign.
Well, and there are big differences as well in the Democrats versus the Republicans, where a lot of the Democrats have this political background, where they've spent a lot of time in Augusta, and the Republicans, a lot of them are political outsiders.
Most of them, arguably, wouldn't you say, Phil? I think most of those were nearly unknown by the Republican electorate when it started.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan Bush has a famous last name, but he's actually the most recent resident of Maine among the 7 candidates, and most of them are unknown, except for Garrett Mason, who was a state senator, was the state majority leader in the Senate way back 10, 15 years ago when Paul LePage was governor.
And ran for governor in 2018.
Was the runner-up in this very primary 8 years ago. He's only 41 now. You remember, you look at the old video, he looks like a kid. It's interesting because there's sort of a bit of one-upmanship in these taxes and spending questions in our debate and in all their appearances. And no one has promised Bobby Charles in terms of cutting state spending. He has said he would cut it by $4 billion. So the state budget's $12 billion, the biennial budget. So that's a third. And, when pressed for details, what would you cut? We don't, you'd have to really check on the math going forward. And it's interesting because the Republican Party, the mantra really since the Reagan era has been cutting taxes. And Bobby Charles, by the way, worked in the Reagan White House, both Bush administrations. Most of his experience is in Washington. Naval intelligence officer, assistant U.S. Secretary of State.
And then his own lobbying business for quite a while, too.
To Augusta, an outsider, and again, that's a plus as far as the Republicans are concerned. They want to shake things up, turn it upside down. Jonathan Bush says shrink Augusta. They want to change the culture of the Janet Mills years.
Well, and a lot of them have said, the job of the governorship is more of an entrepreneurship role, which did seem to work for Paul LePage when he ran on that.
Yeah, it did. He. Thinking back to Paul LePage, first elected in 2010, and he to some extent you can say that he came out of nowhere. He was well known in Waterville as mayor of Waterville and general manager of the Martins Corporation, which was not a bad calling card to have when you get into a campaign. But he also had this incredible life story of having grown up in poverty and abuse and all of that stuff, and even grown up not speaking English, and overcame all that to achieve real education and real success. And so that helped him certainly position him and introduce him to voters. But he had a clear message. He had more of that tough, let's cut spending, let's cut taxes message than the others.